Do you accept the coaster challenge? Yes, I accept the coaster challenge. Do you accept the coaster challenge? Coaster Challenge podcast is here. It's time to face your fears. Get that theme park therapy and let us go through. Coaster Challenge podcast is here. Your fear can disappear. We know that theme park therapy can dry up all your tears. Do you accept the coaster challenge? Yes, I accept the coaster challenge. Do you accept the coaster challenge? We accept because you know we're not average.
You're listening to the Coaster Challenge podcast. A journey where people become fearful to fearless, all from riding roller coasters. So please secure your hats and glasses and keep your hands and arms inside the podcast. It's time to accept the Coaster Challenge with your hosts, Andrew Locke.
Hey everyone, this is Andrew, one of the producers of Coaster Challenge. Got a special guest with us here today. He's a coaster enthusiast, but also has made quite a following for himself on Instagram and TikTok and elsewhere. And he's got quite a following. We'll talk about that, but we'll also talk about his love of coasters. So I'd like to welcome to the podcast, Cole from Park Pros. Welcome, Cole.
Thank you, Andrew. Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited.
Yeah, our pleasure. Our pleasure. Looking forward to talking to you for sure. So to start off, Cole, I gave you a little intro there, but why don't you just tell us about yourself and your love of coasters and parks?
Yeah, so my name's Cole. I run the account Park Pros. I think primarily known at this point for short form content. I started off as a YouTuber, but kind of shifted to the short form content in a couple years ago now. My biggest platform is TikTok. See my stuff on Instagram and YouTube as well. But I am a coaster enthusiast that I think tends to cater. My content at least tends to cater more towards piquing the interests of the general public and stuff. I try to, take these roller coaster terms and concepts and stuff and make them accessible to as many people as possible. That's really kind of the goal of my channel and the content that I create. But I've been a coaster enthusiast for a long time, for 15 years now or so, I would say, maybe even more. But I took a little bit of a hiatus, for a couple years, but I recently came back, I think, into the community around 2019, 2020, and shortly started creating content shortly after that. So it's been fun to get back into it and travel and hit all these parks and rides that I missed when I kind of took a 4 or 5 year break. But I've always loved coasters. I've always loved rides ever since I was little, which I'm sure we'll get into. But yeah.
Sure. Nice. That's awesome. So would you say that, and we'll talk more about your content and like, especially TikTok and your channels in general later, but would you say that your content, like the short form content you spoke of, caters not necessarily to enthusiasts, but more to the general public?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm a coaster enthusiast myself. I have been for a long time. I've been kind of indulging in like the lingo and the credit count stuff and everything that comes with the community ever since I was like 9 or 10. But like I said, I want to make my content as accessible to as many people as possible and also just pique as many people's interests as possible. So I really try to take my kind of knowledge as an enthusiast and break it down to like the bottom levels so as many people can appreciate it, and people that may not have been interested in it in the past, have kind of this outlet or this, I can kind of translate it for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And yeah, I've noticed, and it's interesting talking to you here, because like I was saying before we started recording, it's interesting. We've still not met in person. I'm sure it'll happen eventually. But, hearing your voice here in the interview, which I'm assuming is, I guess, what you call your normal voice, the voice you use in your videos, because I've seen your videos, Instagram and whatnot, it's a little different. It's hard to even put a finger on how it's different, but it almost comes across as almost like a news broadcaster or something like, or documentarian or whatnot. It's got a different lilt to it, if you will. But I know that is the one thing I noticed, along with the way you do your videos, it makes sense what you're saying now, and that you kind of, like you said, dumb things down. I wasn't necessarily identifying that, oh, these videos are not for coaster enthusiasts, but they clearly are something that can be consumed by anyone. And it's interesting that you kind of purposely do that. It makes sense. So for
Yeah.
bigger audience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, my voice sounds different because I am a little sick, but you also I kind of throw the YouTube inflection into my content as well, just to you kind of almost have to because I have such a deep voice. If I don't do it, people are always like, "You sound bored. Why do you sound bored when you're?" So,
Right. Yeah. So you do have a very deep voice. So yeah, that way you're kind of you sound more interested. Yeah, that's a good point. Never didn't think about it that way. Good point. Good point. All right. Well, yeah, as you alluded to, we are going to talk about kind of your earlier days of being an enthusiast before you got involved with, TikTok and Instagram and everything else and YouTube. And the way we start off is in the beginning. That's kind of the best place to start off. So let's talk about like what coaster was it that was your first coaster?
yeah, so I grew up in Wisconsin in the kind of Milwaukee area. So Six Flags Great America has been my home park for as long as I can remember.
Sure.
And my first coaster was probably the little Vekoma family coaster there, Spacely Sprockets Rockets. I think it's just Sprocket Rockets now. But I
Right.
remember going with my family as like a little kid and the little camp cartoon section of the park with like the Scooby Doo and the Jetsons themed rides. And like, I've got vivid memories of like hanging out in there all day as a kid. So I think that one was probably my first official roller coaster, if I had to guess.
Right. Right. That makes sense. And you live now in Chicago proper, right?
I do. Yeah. Downtown
Right,
Chicago.
right, right. Okay, well, so it's still your home park, and yeah, I mean that's a great park. It's one of the larger Six Flags parks. I've been there a couple times now, where you can grow up with it. Where you can start off, like you said, with that like family Vekoma, and then you can build up from there. I mean, there's several non-inverting coasters, and then you can get into various levels of inversions and intensity. And yeah, it's not like your smaller Six Flags or smaller regional park where there's not a lot to build up to. So I'm assuming that you kind of built up from there at that home park and then went beyond.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Great America's always had a very well-rounded coaster lineup, especially
Yeah.
as of late. So, yeah, as the years went on and the trips continued, going with friends for birthday parties and such, you kind of build up the courage to get on the bigger coasters. And I certainly, like from the beginning, wasn't a total daredevil, like adrenaline junkie. It was definitely something I built up to
Right.
as the years
Right.
went on.
And that's fairly, I hate to use this word, but normal, so to speak, in that, from people I've talked to, and I've interviewed many, many people in this podcast at this point, and just talking to friends and stuff. And whether it be friends that are fellow enthusiasts or friends that are just curious, the ones that will send me the videos on Facebook, like, would you ride this? They're not enthusiasts, but they're curious about the hobby. And, from all different people I've talked to, both in and out of the hobby, what's most common and like I said, quote unquote normal is you build up to these bigger rides. You don't start off fearless. There are a couple of people I've talked to over the years, very interesting people, where they're pretty much been fearless their entire lives, even as little kids. They what stopped them from getting on bigger rides as little kids was not the fear; it was height requirements and practicalities. But again, that's very rare. So most of us are like you and myself, and we build things up, over time as we were teenagers or whatnot. So yeah, that's quite normal. So going beyond your first coaster and getting on those bigger and bigger rides at Great America and so forth, eventually at some point you faced a coaster that intimidated you more than any other had in your life or any other since. That kind of apex coaster. It may not be the tallest, it may not have been the fastest, the most inversions. There may be some combination of things there. Generally, what it is about that coaster points to what your primary fears were, but that can depend. We can get into that. But what would you say was the coaster that scared you the most, that intimidated you the most in your life so far?
So I'd say there's probably two of them, and this was when I was way younger. I would say Raging Bull because that was like the biggest coaster I had known at the point when I was, maybe like 8, 9, or 10 or something like that. And then I always was terrified of V2, now called Flash, I think, at Great America, just because of the scream of the LIMs was so intimidating.
Right.
like as being a little kid and hearing that, like as you're like standing on the midway and looking at this coaster, I was like, oh God, that's terrifying. So those were kind of my two I guess, yeah, like you said, apex coasters, like ones that after I kind of got over the hump and rode those, like nothing was off the board for me anymore. I was like totally hooked. Right.
Right, right. So you said it was the limbs. It was specifically the sound of V2.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like when those LIMs like scream on that first launch, like, I don't know.
Right,
It sounds like a screech. Like it's almost earpiece piercing. Right.
right,
And
right.
as
So it
like a,
wasn't, yeah. So it wasn't the acceleration of it.
well, I would say probably a combination of the two,
Combination. Okay, okay.
like, and then for Raging Bull is just the sheer height of,
Right.
a
Okay.
200-foot drop.
Okay. So would you say that your primary fear when it comes to thrill attractions and coasters and whatnot is heights?
No, not anymore. I
Okay.
wouldn't really say. I guess now my fear would be like, I don't even know. I'm not really scared of anything anymore.
Right.
I've done
Right.
some crazy stuff, especially in the last couple months. But I think back then, just like getting over the height hump, yeah, when I was little was the big thing.
Okay, so I have to ask, this is not on script here, but and that's okay. We don't usually stay on script. We usually get off on tangents. So you kind of did an all bite there. I have to ask. So what are the a couple crazy things you did? Like give some highlights of what you did the past. I know you went to Europe with a whole bunch of friends of mine, like Larry and Gino was mentioning, Brett was there, Austin, etc. You did the coaster crew trip. I was supposed to do that trip, but I wound up having to cancel for a number of reasons. But Tim puts on awesome trips. So is it the what you did in coaster crew trip or something you did more recently?
Yeah, so I'd say that the scariest ride I've ever done is it the Scat Tower at
Yes,
Tivoli
yes,
Friheden. I'm not sure if
yes.
that's the tallest Scat Tower in the world, but that is the most terrifying attraction I've ever done, period.
Sure,
I think.
sure.
Um, on top of that, Insanity at the Stratosphere
Stratosphere, yep,
is
yep.
terrifying. I think that's closed now, but that ride is completely terrifying. And then also I don't know what it is, but I always the pod drop slides, the where the floor drops out. I don't know what the technical term for those
Oh
are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The trapdoor slides. Yeah, the
Yeah,
water.
yeah. I
Yeah.
recently, within the last year, I rode the tallest one, the one at American Dream in New Jersey, and that one
Oh
is
yeah.
those still freak me out like pretty regularly. So
Nice, nice. Um, yeah, so you were talking about the Scat Tower. So I've never done one of those. I mean, I guess there is more than one of those in the world. I've never seen one before. Like, I don't know if you know anything about them. I find them fascinating.
I don't know
But
much about them either. I know there was the one in the
yeah,
Dells that was closed because there was a tragic accident on it. And trust me,
yeah,
when I was riding that, that was like the only thing that was going through my mind. So that added an element of fear. Also, just kind of the surrounding. You're so far up there, and you're kind of can see like the town surrounding you, and especially in that at that attraction. And just being up there and like knowing that there's no restraint, it's just you and a free fall between the beginning and ending of the ride is that first second of free fall is like the highest adrenaline peak I think I've ever experienced in my life. Like when I was almost frozen because I'm like, I can't believe I'm literally free falling 300 feet right now.
so you're
So
saying like at the very beginning of like when you first jumped.
yeah,
That's what, yeah,
when they
yeah,
first disconnect the jumper cable or the whatever you call it, bungee
the
cable,
cable.
you're like,
Yeah.
an undescribable feeling. I can't even describe how crazy it felt, but
Yeah.
it was really good though. That is the biggest adrenaline rush I've ever had in my life, bar none.
Right. Right. And yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Yeah, I remember yeah, I remember talking because like I said, a number of my friends went on that trip and I talked to several of them afterwards, what it was like and everything. And I think it was Mark Martinez who's crazy, like certifiably crazy.
Yes, he is.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he definitely had a reaction to that. And yeah, I think Austin did it too, as I recall. Yeah, there was definitely some reactions to that attraction, understandably. And for listeners not heard of scat towers because they're not very common, as I was alluding to, basically this is the only thing you could probably do more crazy than this is skydiving, because basically they're free fall towers where you're not harnessed in, you just jump and fall into a net. and that's it. And, you're dependent upon, the operators to be careful. Again, there was an accident, unfortunately, in the Dells, sadly. As far as wind goes, you have to be very careful with wind. Not you personally, you're just a guest, but the operators need to watch the wind conditions, because the net obviously is only so wide and long and so forth. But so I'm guessing, Cole, for you, thinking about what had happened in the Dells and everything else, that you fall. Of course, this is only a few seconds. This whole thing occurs, but you're like, once you reach that net, you were like, a sigh of relief was part of
Yeah.
what
Oh,
was going on there.
totally. I like, even when I hit the net, I really couldn't even, like I said, I was frozen. I couldn't even
Right.
process what was going on, because it's just such a incredible feeling to be completely free falling. Like, I mean, you don't have a parachute, you don't have anything. You basically are just landing on this net and hoping that it catches you. Right. So,
Right.
yeah, that is bar none the craziest attraction I've done to date.
Right. And then you mentioned Insanity, which was I call it like the sort of swing ride that swung out over, from the stratosphere at the top, kind of just over, Las Vegas. It was just out in the open, what, a couple thousand feet up, I guess it is, 1,500, whatever, however tall the strat is. So that's the other ride that you said was pretty extreme for you.
I would say so. Yeah. That one, the freaky part of it is you're not only spinning, but it tilts you 70 degrees and
Yep.
you're staring straight down. So, and there's
Yep.
nothing between you and you have like a little lap bar restraint, but it's
Yep.
you and the concrete below, basically. So things like
Yeah.
that. And anytime there's something very, minimal holding you back from the ride and your death, like that's what makes it completely
Yeah.
freaky for me.
No kidding. Yeah. I've done that ride. It's been a long time. I've not been to the top of the strat, excuse me, in 10 plus years. I need to go because I wanted the sky jump. David's done it, by the way. It was really highly thrilling for him. But my favorite ride up there is one you actually did mention. I'm surprised because of the whole heights thing and everything. Did you get to do X Scream? The other
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. I found Insanity to be more thrilling, scarier for me. I don't know. So
I could see that. I mean, they both. I mean, I'm not trying to put Insanity down or anything. They're different in because with Extreme you've got that rolling forward thing going over the edge, and it's just different. But yeah, with being tilted and being minimally restrained on Insanity, yeah, it makes sense. Totally makes sense for sure. Okay, well, yeah, no, that's you definitely doing the scat tower. That's pretty crazy. Yeah, so that's awesome. Now, by the way, and again, we'll talk more about your channels and stuff later, but are you at the point with like your TikTok and Instagram and perhaps still the stuff you have on YouTube? Are you kind of like, have you reached the point to say like where Austin is, where you're not working a regular job anymore, or do you still you're working both worlds for the time being?
I do not have a regular job. I've been a full-time entrepreneur for a little over a year now. I do other things on the side. That kind of supplements my income, but yeah, the content is one of my main sources of income right now, kind of like the content machine almost between TikTok and YouTube and some of the other things I do. So
nice. That's awesome. That's great. I mean, you're because like you said you're in your mid-20s. I mean, you're so young and you got there see before Austin did. And it's impressive, he got there, right before he turned 30, right around there. But, to be so young and to be, like you said, like you described as being an entrepreneur, like so independent and, pursuing your passion and that being your source of income, that's fantastic. And hopefully you just continue to grow it. So
thank you.
Awesome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we'll talk more about what your channels are about and especially TikTok here in a little bit. But before we get to that, let's talk about a few other things, kind of a few fun questions. So you talked about earlier how, again, you've been a coaster enthusiast for a long time and you're well-versed in that arena and you've got your coaster count and all that kind of stuff. So first of all, what is your coaster count at this point?
I'd have to double check, but it's somewhere in the 520 range. I think I'm at 526 or 527 at this moment in time. So
nice. That's awesome. I mean, again, being at your age to being well over 500, that's very impressive. I mean, There are a number of people out there that are in around the same age range. Austin and Mark, I know, are higher. Bradley Edholm's another friend. I'm sure you know Bradley, or know of Bradley at least. I mean, Bradley's insane. He's over 1,300 now, and I was just talking to him. He's planning this big trip to South America to get more credits, and and nothing against Bradley, and he's been on the podcast, by the way. But he is very very much a task-driven person. Like, it's accomplishments for him as he checks off more and more of these credits, and he wants to be the number one in the world, which I think the number one is like 6,000 or something. So this couple in Europe or something, I think they are much older, of course. But and my hat's off to him. He's very, very endeavorous. But in any case, you at over 500, it's very impressive, definitely up there. So, and obviously it's just going to keep going up. So you've been on a lot of coasters. So first of all, what would you say is your craziest moment on a coaster that you've had?
I don't really have a great answer for this. I mean, outside of things like cell phones flying at 40 miles past your face, or, experiences like, getting the last ride of the night on like an outlaw run, or night rides on Voyage or something like that. I don't have one that kind of sticks out. I just don't have a great answer for this question. I don't know.
Okay. All right. That's okay. I mean, some of the anecdotal ones you mentioned are pretty typical, and they count.
There's really not one that sticks out to me.
Yeah. Well, if you, as we kind of continue through the interview here, I'll give you kind of the get out of jail free card, if you will. If you think of something, you feel free to mention it. We can kind of revisit this, if you will, but no worries.
Okay. Sounds good.
So this next one, I expect you will have an answer to. What would you say is your favorite coaster?
So I personally document, for me, there's a difference between like your favorite coaster and your number one. So which of those answers do you want?
Okay, so let me see. I'm curious because I've talked to a few people like that have this sort of dichotomy that you just described. So is what you're getting at is sort of the favorite is sort of that nostalgic favorite, whereas your number one is like the best coaster you've been on. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's kind of how I like to differentiate them. Like one that I would. Yeah. Either I think favorite for me is kind of a combination, like you said, nostalgia, like either re-rideability, like good memories on it, right? I have like a list of my favorite coasters, and then a list of, okay, but these are the objectively the best roller coasters I've been on. I kind of I differentiate my list. There's a lot of crossover, but
sure. Yeah.
So
okay,
which of the two do you want?
What's your favorite coaster? What would you say is your favorite coaster?
I would say my favorite coaster in terms of like just pure memories and I would say is American Eagle at Six Flags Great America. If you ask anyone, that's my favorite ride in the park. Just something that like I've got a ton of memories on with friends and family, and there's a lot of times I'm just driving by Great America where I'll have like 20 minutes to spare, and I'll just walk to the back of the park and go ride that ride because it's just such a good roller coaster in my opinion, and very underrated. Objectively, and this is new because it's just changed in the last couple months, so you're getting the exclusive here because I have not shared this. My number one roller coaster is Zadra at Energylandia.
Okay, so that's the other answer, right?
That's the other answer. That's objectively the best roller coaster I've ever been on.
Okay, all right. So first of all, as far as American Eagle goes, I've been on that. It's a great coaster. I have respect for you having as your number one. It makes sense, it's your original home park, the memories, the nostalgia. It's interesting too because probably the most famous Intamin wooden coaster is El Toro. I rode El Toro this summer for the first time. It's one of those. It was a white whale for me for years. I grew up in New Jersey, although when I grew up, that was long before El Toro was built. I'm a little older than you, but I've been back to Great Adventure many times because visiting friends and family. I love going back to New York, New Jersey, and I kept going back to Six Flags, and I kept El Toro was closed. And so I finally wrote it in August, and it was one of the biggest disappointments of my life. It was up there with some others that are people know me for, which I mean, I don't necessarily, I try not to be known for hot takes, but sometimes I have them. We all do, I think. Still Vengeance is another huge disappointment for me. I think that coaster is way overrated, in my opinion. But El Toro was a really bad disappointment because I love Intamin. Intamin's my favorite manufacturer. So I would say that American Eagle is a better ride than El Toro, and it's also built by Intamin. A lot of people don't realize that Intamin made wooden coasters way back in the early 80s. So I mad respect for you loving an Intamin wooden coaster. That's what I'm getting.
Yeah, it's a classic. A couple of things. El Toro is in rough shape this year. I wouldn't count. I rode it this year, and it was my number 2 overall, and I don't even know where it stands anymore because it's in that bad a shape. So you called it a bad year.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know what I was gonna say. It's just that one thing.
I mean, I'll ride El Toro again. Hopefully, I mean, I have my doubts, but hopefully Six Flags, maybe with this merger, who knows, maybe El Toro will be restored to greatness, not just fixed, like, from what happened last year. Who knows what will happen with it, but it
needs a retracking. It's like the one prefab that hasn't received a full retracking. That's what it needs.
Right. And hopefully I'll get to ride the prefabs in Europe. I've not. I think there's 2 of them. I think in Europe, as I recall.
Yep.
I just haven't gotten to those particular parks yet, but I will. But yeah, I mean, I do recognize that El Toro, part of it for me, part of the disappointment was that it's not what it used to be. And that's fine. It is what it is. So I'm curious, what was your number 1? So you rode Zadra. Was that this year when you went with the coaster?
Yeah, that was in August.
Right.
My number 1 prior to that was Steel Vengeance. And
okay, the other one I mentioned. Okay, and I don't hate RMC. Don't get me wrong, Cole.
So Steel Vengeance is my number 2 now.
Okay.
And I rode Gwazi a couple weeks ago, and I thought Gwazi was going to drop for a little bit for me because Zadra is almost like an upgraded version of Gwazi in my opinion. But no, Gwazi is still great too. It might even be my number 3. I'm not sure.
Okay.
I love the huge RMCs. They do such a good job with those. I'm starting to run a little bit dry on the medium, small tier RMCs. I don't know. I think a lot of them are repetitive, but the hypers to me are all like top 5 roller coasters in the world, in my opinion.
Okay. All right. What I was starting to say is I don't, because I'm going to share some things about Zadra. I don't hate RMC. I don't have and this is not directed to you, Cole. Don't get me wrong here. This is the coaster community in general. There seems to be this like ferventness with RMC. And I think in some cases, legitimately, they're great rides, etc. But I think there's a lot of bandwagoning that goes on too. And I've never been a bandwagoner. I was not the popular kid in school, and I'm fine with that. I always beat to my own drum, and I'm very proud of that. And at the same time, Steel Vengeance isn't my number 1. Zadra is not my number 1. For me to make a point, I'm not saying that either. I mean, my number 1 is legitimately it's Terran. And it's number 1 that I share with a number of people. And actually, one of my friends from Europe, from Switzerland, it just became his number 1 over Ride to Happiness this past week. Wintertron, we riding it at night and all that. But I know, Austin, who I respect Austin's technical analysis of coasters. He's very technical, and like me, also values theming. We have very similar opinions in that regard. When he announced Terran as his number 1 last year in his top 25 video, I was like, okay, all right. I feel really good about myself now. Again, it was still my number 1 anyway at that point. But again, we all have our different opinions. I need to go back to Energylandia. I despise that park because that coaster collection is an embarrassment. It is ridiculous. I mean, Zadra and Hyperion and Abyssus aside, the fact that park has 2 family boomerangs. It has the worst wild mouse I've ever been on. Multiple SBF spinners. I mean, that park is a joke. I'm sorry, it's a joke. And again, I'm not afraid to share my opinion, as you can tell. And the theming is so inconsistent. The back of the park is better. I hear they're going to fix the park. I will go back there. It's sad they're not building the tilt coaster. but I will go back there eventually. But apparently the ride I got on Zadra, as I rode it last summer, so in 2022. Apparently 2022 was a really bad year for Zadra. Everyone that rode it last year hated it. It felt slow, etc. So apparently this year I heard it got better again. You rode this year, so I do need to get back there. And rating rides, the experiences change over time. They can get worse, they can get better, but it just didn't impress me at all. I was like, why? What's going on here?
Yeah, for me, Zadra had like very comparable elements to Steel Vengeance and Gwazi, but with just like the most incredible pacing. Like to me, it's the best paced roller coaster I've ever been on. Just flying. It was also like 90 degrees, middle of summer, really hot.
Right.
So that I'm sure that played a role in it, but I couldn't believe how fast it took its course, and like some that you're taking some of the elements that like it almost feels unsafe how fast you fly into the brakes too. You could throw another 2,000
Right.
feet on that, and it probably would be okay. So for me, that's one of the
Right.
big thing. I'm all about pacing. Like a well-paced ride to me is very important. I don't like any lulls, or I like taking elements at either the appropriate or, accelerated speeds, where it's almost feeling out of control. So that was the big thing
Right.
that I loved about that ride. So if you had a bad experience, it probably had something to do with that.
Yeah, because my experience on that ride is nothing like we described. Pacing was awful. It felt like a slow ride. It did not feel like Wazi at all.
Hmm.
Because I've been to Guam many, many times. It's basically a home park for me. It's an hour away, Tampa from Orlando. But yeah, that's why I need to go back there. But I want to go back to the park until they fix it, because that park it just pains me to walk in there. Part of the issue for me is I just finished going to Phantasialand and Europa Park for the first time,
Okay.
and so I have a culture shock walking in there because yeah, how do you go from two of the greatest parks in the world to yeah I'm sorry, I call it Six Flags Poland. I still stick by that. It's awful. It's just, I mean, that's an embarrassment for Six Flags parks, quite frankly, for some of them to be labeled that way. But I mean, it's just awful. But anyways, I will get back there. Hopefully, it gets better. It can't get much worse. But yeah, it sounds like you had a great ride on Zadra, nonetheless. Now, by the way, have you been have you been to Phantasialand yet or no?
I've not, no.
Okay.
It is my number one bucket list park in the world. And I'll get there within the next year. I'll just say
Gotcha.
that. I'm not sure when, but I'm going to make it a priority. So
one of the things I wonder about is the pacing on Terran is insane. There's no lulls on it. It's just bam the whole way through. And I'm curious to see what your take on it. I'm not going to say it's going to be your number one. I'm not going to predict that. I'm guessing it won't, because you're probably going to be sensitive to the fact, given how much you love RMC and the RMCs you mentioned, the lack of inversions. Sometimes some people, it bothers them that doesn't have inversions. To me, it's not missing anything without them. But anyway, I'm curious to see what your take on that coaster is, because the pacing is incredible.
I'm looking forward to getting out there just for the
Yeah.
entire experience as well.
Oh yeah, the whole park's amazing. I spent 3 days the last week. It was awesome. So even being sick, it was awesome. So all right. Your favorite Zadra, and then your favorite is American Eagle, and then your number one Zadra. I totally understand both of those. Makes sense. What would you say is your least favorite coaster?
Currently existing, or all time?
All time. Yeah.
The worst roller coaster I've ever been on was Green Lantern at Six Flags Magic Mountain.
Gotcha. What about your experience riding that ride made it the worst one for you?
Well, I mean, that ride has a reputation of its own. I
Yep.
rode it probably when I was 12 or 13. So like I was maybe like 100 pounds soaking wet. So I
Right.
got completely thrown around, my legs just banging against the
Right.
leg rests. And I don't think anyone likes that ride, but when you're a skinny little 10-year-old and you're getting thrown around, it's not the most fun thing. I recently rode the Zach Spin at Grona Lund though, and that was a lot better. So maybe it was just a size thing at the time. I was so little and just getting tossed around
Right.
this out of control ride. But But yeah, I would say Green Lantern is my least favorite coaster. I got off that like almost in pain,
Oh,
traumatized.
really? Yeah, interesting. Because I've ridden. It's not my favorite, but I've ridden Green Lantern multiple times. I used to live in California, and I've ridden quite a few of the SNS 40s, and to me they ride similar. I don't hate Green Lantern. I don't have the hatred a lot of people have for it. I understand why people do. I get it. But I just never had any bad experiences on it. So, but again, I'm fairly unique in that regard. But again, I didn't ride it as a 10-year-old, skinny little kid, so that's the difference
Yeah.
too. But yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, you're definitely not alone in that being your least favorite coaster. I can tell you that much. So. All right. Well, thanks for kind of going over some of those kind of fun, kind of enthusiast sort of, favorites and interesting questions there. Let's go ahead and switch gears now for the rest of the interview and talk about your brand, your channels and whatnot. So you mentioned you started with YouTube. Of course, you've got a huge following on Instagram because then that's how I mainly know of you. And then you have TikTok. Those are kind of your three kind of main outlets.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the three. And I post pretty much the same content on all three of those. It's just different outlets that reaches different audiences.
Got it. Now, also, just out of curiosity, so Part Pros, it's plural, but it's just you, right? You're just a one-man show.
It's just me. Yeah. Yep.
Got it. Got it.
So,
Okay. Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Just as curious if you had anyone that helped you or whatnot. Maybe you never know. Maybe that'll happen eventually, or you'll need to have someone help you or something. But as you grow, so TikTok is your most successful of the outlets that you have. Is that right?
yeah, I would say so. I mean, we're almost at 400,000 followers on there. That's kind of the platform I had the most immediate success with when I started doing short form content, and where my content still kind of resonates the most in my style and such. So I would say I create content primarily for TikTok
Okay.
if I had to choose from the three platforms.
What do you think your secret to success is on TikTok?
I think just like I mentioned this a little bit before, but I think just the approachability of my content. I try to make it as accessible and understandable for as many people as possible. You'll hardly ever see me bring up like, manufacturer names or like ride models unless I do like a good job explaining it, because to most people, the 99.9% of the population, like an Intamin multi-launch coaster means nothing. Like no one knows. Like if you're a normal person, you don't know what Intamin is. You don't know what a multi-launch that means, right?
Right.
So unless I'm like introducing that and it's a big subject of a video, I always try to make sure to let that these kind of enthusiasts, like terms that are well known within the community and the industry, like are translated well to an average person that might like rides, might go to their home park once a year, but they can still have an understanding of my content. And I think that's where I've been really successful, is having an enthusiast mindset, and just translating it to a normal person who loves rides, loves attractions, but it's not one of their main interests or hobbies.
Right. And this is what you're mentioning towards the beginning too, which, like I said, makes a lot of sense. And so, out of curiosity, so let's say you're hanging out, with friends. See some of the friends I mentioned, say Brad, Austin, things like that, talking about, of course, coasters. I'm assuming when you're hanging out with friends like that, you're talking about those technicals. You're talking about manufacturers, right? I mean, kind of like the conversation you and I have had here. We've talked about some of those things, right? You talk about those things, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm a coaster enthusiast. I'm a roller coaster nerd. Like I love this stuff. I love not so much the technical stuff, but I love the part that I love about the industry is like the rumors and the storylines and the, like the speculation of new rides and stuff like that. And, the drama that kind of happens, not with like content creators or anything, but like between manufacturers and parks, and like, will they build this? Will they not? Stuff like that. So those are often storylines that end up in my content too, that I kind of translate to the GP as well, I would say. But at the end of the day, I'm a coaster nerd. I've been a nerd for 15 years. Like, I love this stuff. Like it's what, like, I get a kick out of it. So, but it's definitely not something that I try to like being super enthusiast in my content. You won't see a lot of that, I wouldn't say.
Right. No, that makes sense. So the thing I was getting at there is, like, do you have to like make a conscious effort when you're making your content to like not think naturally or not talk naturally how you would say with your friends, like turning it
Yeah.
off?
Oh, totally. I think when I'm creating content, I try to use that filter of what would be, how am I going to phrase this in the way that most people will understand it? Or if it's a very important detail that not a lot of people understand, how can I translate it for them to make them, understand what this ride model is or what this manufacturer is, right?
Right.
So, and I think that's not something that like will turn an enthusiast off either. If I explain what Intamin is or what, like a Zach spin is, to the general public in my audience, like an enthusiast isn't going to click off the video in those 2 seconds because, they think
Right.
I'm so. So
Right.
I think that's really what resonates with people is that though. But yeah, I kind of have to take a filter to it when I'm, take the enthusiast goggles off a little bit and approach it like I would like one of my friends who's not a coaster enthusiast.
Right. Interesting. So, and forgive me, I mean, I'm not a big like consumer of YouTube content. Like I'll go on YouTube to look for things. I use YouTube sort of as a to get information. Like for example, like I love cruises. I will use YouTube. I'll do searches on YouTube to look up information on a cruise ship that I've not been on yet to find out features of it, things like that. I'm not someone that like goes onto YouTube and watches a lot of coaster videos. I don't have the time for that. I don't like watching coasters before, like POVs before I ride them. I like to have the surprise aspect. Probably the one person I've watched the most videos from is Austin because I love his concept POVs, and that I'm okay watching because it's just it's a theoretical of what the coaster is going to be. It's not an actual POV, but
Yeah.
I just don't do a lot of YouTube consuming, so I've not really seen your content for the most part. I think on YouTube, and that's nothing about you. It's more about me, like I was saying. I want to preface that there. I follow you on Instagram, of course, and obviously you and I've chatted on there, and I've seen your videos on there. Again, really cool. Again, that short form stuff. I'm not a TikToker either. Again, I just don't have the time to focus on these mediums. Again, I'm unique in that regard. Obviously, you've got hundreds of thousands of followers that love your content, and that's freaking awesome. So I have not seen your content, a lot of it. So I want to preface that and say that because you were saying that you're mainly do short form. So have you not really done anything like documentary style kind of stuff or?
I have in the past. I think I'm still trying to kind of figure out I want my long form content strategy to be
Yeah,
because I have people that ask for it all the time, like, and it just takes me forever to make a well done YouTube video to my standards,
right.
in the time that it takes me to make one of those, I can make 5 to 10 short videos that I think
Sure.
will perform better. I kind of have more of a better feel for, and I think resonates better with people. So I do make long form content on YouTube pretty inconsistently, kind of when I am feeling inspired to, or there's a topic that interests me that I kind of want to expand on. And I think that's probably going to be my strategy going forward for it. If there's a park I really want to talk about or a subject that comes up that, I'm not going to be able to squeeze into a minute video. But
Yeah.
the issue I'm having with that is pretty much any topic like that comes up, I can squeeze and compartmentalize into
Right.
a short video, right? And
Right.
so, I find myself going, well, why would I make a long form video on this when I can explain it to people in a much more efficient and engaging package, right?
Right.
Now that's kind of the thing I struggle with, and I'm more. At this point, I feel like I've kind of, I have a good feel for what's going to hit on short form content, what people are going to be most interested in. So, um,
Sure.
that's
Sure.
also always an internal battle with me. I would love to have the time to create more long
Yeah.
form content, but it takes a long time to make really engaging minute long videos, believe it or not. Like it
Oh, I
takes
know.
me a
I
long.
believe it. To do it right. Yeah, I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah.
That's great. You obviously have to focus on quality, and that's great to see. And I think that's part of why you're successful and why you continue to be successful. But as far as I love documentaries in general. I love learning, and I have watched a number of coaster themed documentaries, whether it be, Coaster Studios, the RMC documentary, which was great. Scott helped with, of course, too. They were all great on that. The Legacy of Arrow, I've watched several times. Shout out to Chris. He did an amazing job with that. He's an amazing video maker. And now he's working with Scott and some others on the Schwarzkopf, which that documentary, which will be great, Legacy of Schwarzkopf for Ace and so forth. And I'm looking forward to that. Chris, Airtime Thrills, his Kings Island documentary, that was great. The most recent one I watched, and I'm guessing Jacob, because you probably met him through Austin and Brett and everything. Jacob Selleck did his first, I think it's his first. And he knows I'm a big Intimate fan, so he and I connected on it. We chatted on it. We were going to try and have him on the podcast here, but he's ran out of slots here since we're finishing things. But anyways, his multi-part documentary on Intimate. Have you seen that, by the way?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, he for a first effort especially did a great job. But what I'm getting at is, having seen a number of coaster documentaries, between your voice, you've got a great voice, combined with your detailed nature and you kind of focus on quality. I could see you doing well, and then also this sort of, I don't want to say dumbing down, but sort of the approach where you make it very approachable for a wide audience. I could see you making documentaries about parks, about ride manufacturers, whatever it may be, about eras of coaster development, whatever it may be. It could be multiple manufacturers with that, where you could be very successful. Because of the combinations of those things for you. But
yeah, I appreciate that. And I'd love to have the time to put out a YouTube video a week, but it takes forever to make content. I don't think people realize how difficult it is to put together a well packaged video that performs well, and especially on YouTube, where you're incorporating like a thumbnail and tags and analytics, and there's just a lot that goes into it. And for me, my kind of skill set and my interests lie in the short form, and that's where I've had the most success, historically. Sure. So I think that kind of continues to take precedence for me as I kind of try to grow on those platforms, which carries over to YouTube as well. I've gained a lot of subscribers from primarily my short form content on that platform, but yeah, I would love to find a healthy balance between long form and short form, and do some of those things that you were mentioning, some documentary style, because I think there are some interesting stories I would love to tell. That are kind of more warranted for a long form content style. But it's really just a balancing act. I'm a one-man show right now, so
right. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, what's successful for you. You know what your bread and butter is. The short form stuff, the TikTok stuff. That's awesome. Keep going. But all I'm saying is you, because obviously, who knows? Are you going to be doing this for the rest of your life? Maybe. Who knows where this may take you? But as you continue to grow this, and just as time goes by, if you're thinking about doing that long form stuff, I'm just one person saying, hey, I think it'd be great for you to, if you go back to that, or get more into that. I think you could do well with it too.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. And really, it shows what a good filmmaker you are. The fact that you point out that it's not easy to me, even the short ones, the 1 minute ones, because some people would say, oh, it's easy. Well, no offense to those people, but yeah, some YouTube and TikTok and whatever creators, they do put together videos very quickly, but the quality isn't necessarily there. So to make a good quality video, with keeping your audience in mind, everything else, it takes time, and clearly that. So
absolutely,
yeah. So long form aside, so I know you're focused on the short form stuff. In terms of how you want to grow your channel and brand over the next few years, what are you planning? What can you share about that?
I have a couple things in the works. I'm trying to create this into like a one man content machine business sort of thing. And there's some stuff within the next couple months that kind of will speak to that more as I'm able to share things. But in terms of the brand, I really want to continue to grow my audience, and internationally. The Europe series has done really well of just kind of documenting each of my European park visits, as well as kind of the entire trip encapsulated. I'm doing a little bit of a series on those. Have performed really well in terms of like new people coming into the channel. So I think going
Nice.
forward, reaching internationally and trying to reach new audiences that way is going to be a big thing for me. But I kind of want to be the short form subject matter expert on all things roller coasters, attractions, period, theme parks, especially, period. That's where I'd love the channel to grow. If someone wants to get a review of a park or something on TikTok, they're searching park pros, that's where they go
Yeah.
to. And I'd
Yeah.
love to expand the content and hit as many parks, do as much as I can, and really try to grow the brand both internationally and just becoming kind of that subject matter expert in the field.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, and as someone, as I mentioned earlier, that like doesn't have the time, and I mean that in a good way. I mean, I have just so much positive stuff. I mean, a lot of it is travel. If I'm not on a trip, I'm planning a trip. It's almost, I'm not really exaggerating when I say that, and I'm not complaining because the vast majority of my trips they're not even for work; they're for fun. I'm blessed to for a number of reasons which I won't get into here. I'm able to do all these trips, financially, time wise, etc. Part of it is I work from home, so I can work from anywhere. So when I'm traveling, on a cruise I'm doing 3 cruises in a row in February. I'm able to work from cruise ships, which is awesome, and use internet access. So yeah, I'm very blessed to have all that travel, but yeah, I am very busy. I don't, watch much TV, etc. But if I'm going to watch a video or look up something, I mentioned like looking things up on YouTube or whatnot, and I do look on TikTok sometimes. I'm looking for shorter videos. That's one thing that's great about TikTok is I don't have the time to watch. I watched Jacob's documentary because I love Intamin. I want to support Jacob. He's a great guy, but it's rare that I'll watch videos that long. So it's like once a year I'll watch a documentary like that, so I appreciate people like yourself that do these shorter videos that are easier to consume and you can watch it, very quickly, literally, and that's great. Would you say that the Costa Crew European trip was like a watershed event for you in terms of, because you said it's very successful? Is this now getting you like very excited about, say going to Phantasialand, your number one bucket list park in Europe, going to other parts, Asia, all over the world, whatnot, because you realize, one, you're looking forward to it because you're a coaster enthusiast,
yeah,
but two, what it can do for your content.
yeah, I think the content has added, especially being successful with the short form content, it's added a new element to my park going experiences, because like you said, I'm a coaster enthusiast. I'd be traveling and doing this for my own leisure anyways, even if I wasn't creating content. But I think like when I'm at a park and something happens, or like I go on a ride and I feel a certain way about it, I can almost conceptualize the video as like my park going day, as my day goes on at the park, right? And so that's
Right.
kind of added a fun element to it as I've kind of gotten better at storytelling and compartmentalizing my days into minute or shorter videos where it's just boom, 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 boom. It's kind of fun to I leave a day at the park and I'm like, wow, especially new parks, I'm like, wow, I cannot wait to make the video on that park because it's going to be so awesome, right? Because these handful of things happened. Obviously, what you see in the videos is like a fraction of what actually goes on throughout the days, because I can't sit there and go, I went on this ride 5 times, I went on this ride, right? It's not, no one's going to care. You got to be really speedy with it. But that's added kind of like a new layer of excitement for me in visiting parks and new attractions and stuff, is because I like leave the day going like, wow, that video is going to be awesome,
Right. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. Yeah, and I can relate in a very small way. Again, I'm not a video creator. I'm more of and even this, I'm not a serious photographer. I'm not your coaster nerd that carries around a mirrorless camera. I just, I love technology. I could totally see myself buying one. I could afford to buy one. That's not an issue. I mean, they're not cheap, but I could go get one if I wanted to. I don't want to carry it around. So I'm an iPhone only kind of guy. I always get the latest iPhone. I love my new 15 Pro Max camera. The zoom is great on it with the tetraprism. It's awesome. And it's good enough for me. And to that degree of just carrying an iPhone, that's pretty much it. I can relate in that just, my social media posts, just, which is I really, for the most part, I just try to use social media as much as possible to, just remain positive and just share what's going on, my travels, whatever I'm doing. And so when I'm at parks, I've had that same experience. I had this last week at Fantasyland. I'm thinking about, this, I'm going to do this, or got this photo, and like I'm thinking of a creative tagline for it, a headline for it, for my story or whatever it may be. And so to that small degree, I can relate to what you're saying as I'm going to the park, taking my photos, hanging out with my friends. Sometimes it's what my friends, what we're got going on, some joke with us. It's something where I'm like, oh, I can post that. It'll be fun. So, but for you, it's a much bigger thing, because it's your brand, it's your living, and you're sharing this with hundreds of thousands of people, much bigger following. It is kind of fun when you're kind of going through that, like, oh, I can do something with this. Oh, there's an idea. It's like those light bulbs coming on as you're just enjoying the heck out of yourself, at a park for the first time. So, so I think it's got to be, you've got to be excited, I guess, because you're just getting started with your international travels, right? Like, you've been to Europe. Where else have you been internationally so far? Or is that just it? Or
I had been to Europe before. I only did one park when I was there the last time. Oh, I've been to Europe like a handful of times, just not for coast. This was my first kind of like mostly coaster dedicated trip. So I think down the line, I obviously was doing a lot of the Scandinavia because of the coaster crew trip, and I thought that was kind of like a convenient way to knock out all those parks. I think within the next year, and people comment this all the time in my content, they're like, you missed Europa Park. You went to Germany, you missed Europa Park, you missed. I'm like, I know. I'll get back. Don't worry. So I think kind of hitting those like handful of like Europe's like premier parks next year is going to be very high on my to-do list, knocking those out. And then from there, it's just kind of, wherever, whatever's next, basically. But I think Europe, I still got some unfinished business in Europe, I would say.
Clearly.
That's my priority for the next year or so.
Yeah, there's a lot of parks there. I mean, I've been to Europe many times, and I've been to a bunch of parks there, but I still have so many more parks to hit there. And and then for you, I mean, I've been in the Middle East, like I said, I've been to Asia, and I still even scratch the surface in both of those regions. I mean, there's so many parks to go to.
People don't realize how many parks and roller coasters are out there, especially the general public. People who comment on my posts a lot of times, like, do not realize like Europe is as big, if not bigger, than the United States in terms of like the sheer amount of parks and rides. Like,
yep. And then China is insane. Middle East has got quite a few now, and they keep growing. And then even South America and Africa, there are pockets all over the place. So,
exactly.
And that's great for you because this gives you more opportunities to grow your content over time. And then of course going back to the parks and the parks you've already been to with new rides and changes and things like that. So for sure. So kind of last few questions are kind of coming back to you personally a little bit here to wrap things up. This next question is kind of our most serious question that we ask, if you will. And it's kind of a mortality question. And really it comes down to, how would you like your friends, your family, your colleagues, those that are in your life, how would you like them to remember you by?
Wow, we're getting deep here on the
it's a deep question.
Coaster podcast. I guess the most important thing is someone who lived fearlessly, pursued their passions, loved fully, and just enjoyed life without any restriction. Then that's what I try to do with pursuing one of my passions as a full-time job. That's what I'm doing with Park Pros right now, and how I try to live my life without any fear or restriction. So,
no, that's very, very noble. I mean, if that's how you're living your life and that's how people remember you by because of it, then that's fantastic. So, great answer. So, the other kind of big final question here, a little less serious, is, I know you understand now the mission of Coaster Challenge and mission of, about facing fear. And again, you just identified that as being a big part of how you want to be remembered by, being fearless. Do you have any advice for those that are listening, maybe people that are struggling with facing their fears, or maybe they're earlier on in their kind of their journey of facing fear? They haven't gotten on that scariest coaster yet or whatnot. Any advice you think you can give?
Yeah, I would say, life is short. Like, don't take anything too seriously. Live without any regrets. When it comes to the moment where you're facing that moment of anxiety or questioning or anything, I would say just kind of take a step back and then push right through it, right? When it comes to riding that coaster or, asking that girl out or whatever it comes to, I would say, it's worse to, live life questioning what would have been than experiencing what it is, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, just go for it. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Great advice. Thank you. And I like the way you kind of justify that, or kind of like going through it. It's just like pushing through it. I don't think anyone ever said anything like that, but makes sense. It's just like the idea is that, don't like stop and think. And because when you start thinking, then you're going to start second guessing and letting the fear come in, the anxiety come in. Just push through it. Just do it. Just jump on the ride and get it done. And you'll be happy and, and proud of yourself. Yeah. It makes a lot of sense. So
totally. Just go for it.
Yeah. Just go for it. Exactly. Thank you. All right. So the last thing is, and we've been talking about your brand and outlets and so forth, but if you could share, all the ways, this is your self-promotion opportunity, all the ways that people can find you, your various channels, TikTok, etc. If you have a website, social media, please share away.
Yeah. So I'm at Park Pros on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Those are my three main platforms. I actually a couple months ago released a strategic theme park guide. So if you're if you're a mom with a kid that's interested in parks, or, you're kind of getting into it yourself, you can find that linked on any of my socials. So just look up Park Pros, click the link in my description or bio, and that'll lead you right there. I think it's like $10 now. It's down to, it's 40 pages worth of my 15 years of experience in navigating parks and, experiencing, crowds and how to navigate those and lines and what's the best strategies to get on as many rides as possible. So if you're kind of a newcomer in the space, which it seems like this podcast is more catered to, people kind of getting into it or conquering fears, like that's a really good strategic kind of, in my style of translating things from an enthusiast mind to more of a general public mind. That's something worth checking out. But yeah, Park Pros on all social media, and yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Well, Cole, well, thank you. Again, I know you're getting over a cold yourself, just like me. Appreciate you taking the time and despite how you're feeling to chat with us. And it's been really, really interesting. And you have a great positive attitude. And like I said, you're a young guy, you're smart, got a great voice, you've got a good head on your shoulders. So I think, you're, even before this podcast, sometimes we'll come up with friends, I'll put it this way, talking about, people ask me, who do you think are like the best influencers / YouTubers, as the old saying was, however you want to describe it, people that are making media content in the coaster enthusiast or parks world. And even though I didn't know you that well, I've seen some of your content, the things I know of you, I've heard of you. You're one of the people I did identify in that regard, along with, Austin's been Insider, Theme Park Worldwide, Sean's amazing, and some others, Airtime Thrills. But there's a lot of content creators out there, as you know better than anyone, Cole. And I think you were kind of rising above a lot of them for good reason. You clearly know what you're doing. You've got a great strategy. And I think you're just going to see a lot of success moving forward. So
thank you, Andrew. I appreciate the kind words, and I appreciate you having me on. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cole. Appreciate it.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. If you want to see more of us, we upload every Friday. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube, all at Coaster Challenge. Links are in the description below. Thanks for joining us here today.